Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Atakama and Stealthbits live demo showcase. My name is Jeremy Bielefeld, and thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to showcase a truly remarkable integration solution for classifying and protecting sensitive data. It is my pleasure to introduce Dmitry Nemirovsky, co-founder and COO of Atakama, and Adam Rosen, VP of Product Strategy at Stealthbits. Dmitry and Adam will showcase the best-in-class protection for files through multi-factor, military-grade encryption, and the power of a full-fledged security solution when combined with a leading data classification tool. The seamless integration fills a major void left in the security market. We will demonstrate how easy it is to use. Just a reminder, all questions throughout the demonstration are welcome. If you do have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the tab on the right-hand side anytime throughout the session. We'll answer them at the end of the demonstration. And with that, I'll hand it over to Adam.
Thanks, Jeremy. So what we're going to run through today is really the end-to-end workflow between Stealthbits and Atakama, starting with that core challenge of understanding what information is sensitive or regulated and necessitates further security controls, and then walking through how to understand where that information exists, who has access to it, what they're doing with it, proactively stopping that information from being abused, and as part of that, the integration where Atakama is going to apply selective encryption to files that meet a particular standard. So, Jeremy, can you just confirm that you're able to see my screen all right?
Yep, we can see.
Excellent. So what we're looking at right here is the web interface, the Stealthbits, and I could start to kind of take a look around at some of the different systems that we're auditing and see where there's different types of sensitive content and some of the risks associated with that content. So just to kind of start this off here, we're looking for social security numbers, credit card numbers, and other sensitive identifiers. And then I'm flagging exceptions, which are places where that information might be exposed to particular risk. So for example, if I look at this finance folder, I can see exactly which files there meet different standards, in this case, US social security numbers within a text file and a spreadsheet. I can tell you exactly which people have access to that information and how they're gaining that access through different conditions in the environment. And then furthermore, I can tell you how those users are behaving and what they're doing with the information. So this is a good place to start and begin to triage and understand where that information exists and dig into all the information that you need to bring back. You can search for a particular type of information or a particular person. If I want to know what sensitive data Bonnie has access to or what she's done with those records, this is where I can start to do some of those retroactive forensics and say, what has a person done over a particular period of time? And I can see she's reading and making changes to some of these documents that we're interested in. So that's good, when you've got a particular question that you need to answer about what's sensitive, where is it, who has access to it, what are they doing with it. But then we want to get into some of the different types of risks associated with it. So not just who has access to that type of data right now, but who could gain access to that information and how, and some of the different exploitable conditions across different parts of the environment responsible for that. So in this case, I'm looking at credit cards and PII again, and I can see all these different permissions as it sits right now can be exploited to gain access to some of those records in different ways. So I can look at these attack paths and see a case where Bonnie doesn't have access to credit card numbers, but she has the ability to reset Andrea's password, and Andrea's account could change the membership of a group that would in turn give her access to those credit card numbers. So we do that detailed attack mapping to give you that understanding of not only where it exists, but who has access to it, what they're doing with it, and remediate any risks associated. And as part of that, we want to apply targeted encryption to documents that meet a particular standard. In this case, social security numbers, credit card numbers, and date of birth. So I've got this other report here which summarizes what we're feeding to Atakama. So the way this integration works is we set up the rule within Stealthbits that anything that met a particular type of criteria is going to be selectively encrypted by Atakama. And you can see I've got my phone down here. That's the way Atakama works, is it distributes the keys. Dmitry will tell you more about that in a minute. But the effect is now Stealthbits has flagged all of this information as needing to be encrypted, and Atakama has selectively applied encryption to those files identified by Stealthbits. So now if I look at one of these files on this report here, if I drop down to this folder and I go to open one of those files that it marked as sensitive, you'll see over here on my phone that it's prompting for additional authorization. So where it says tap to approve, I can hit that button on the phone, and then Atakama will allow that document to launch. So that's how the process works end to end between Stealthbits and Atakama, starting with identifying what's sensitive, looking at the risks associated with it, and allowing Stealthbits to apply that targeted encryption. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dimitri, and we can learn a little bit more about how the Atakama solution operates.
Hi, everyone. Let me just, okay, I'm going to share my screen here so everyone can see my screen now. You guys can see it now?
Looks good.
Excellent, thank you. That was a terrific job, Adam. Thank you so much. I don't even know if I need to show anything at this point, but I will spend a little bit of time just explaining Atakama. And I have to say that, sometimes, things in isolation on their own are fantastic. Cookies come to mind. I love cookies. Who doesn't like cookies? They're delicious. But they're better when you combine them with something. I love cookies so much, but I love them even more when I dip them into milk. Now, in that scenario, I would say that, Stealthbits is the cookies. They're delicious. And I would say Atakama is the milk. You may not necessarily love milk, but it's good for you. And that's sort of where encryption lives, right, in the world of cybersecurity. You don't love it, but it's really important and good for you. So this combination, I could not be more excited about, right? You have, on the one hand, this tool that's identifying your risk, right? And it's doing so in a really meaningful way, great user experience, and providing you the opportunity to really, appreciate what's going on within the organization. And then you're combining that tool with Atakama that provides unparalleled protection for those files that you've identified as sensitive or containing sensitive information. So in essence, Adam showed you how the process works from start to finish. Atakama basically reads the labels, and as soon as the label is read by Atakama, the file is instantly encrypted wherever it's located. From a user standpoint, when they go to open up a file, they receive the notification on their phone and they decrypt the file. But what's happening behind the scenes with Atakama is that we are in fact encrypting each file with its own unique encryption key. And we're utilizing AES 256-bit encryption, which is considered, military grade, best encryption available right now in the market. For all intents and purposes, unhackable, right? But we've repurposed that AES 256-bit encryption algorithm. And what we do is when each file receives its own AES 256-bit key, Atakama takes that key and distributes it in shards, right? Pieces of the key to physical devices controlled by the user, with the normal construct being pieces of the shards existing on the user's computer and pieces of the shards existing on a second device, which usually tends to be a smartphone, which is running an Atakama mobile app. And indeed, when a user goes to open up an encrypted file, they'll see that the file does contain this lock icon to designate that the file is encrypted. And when the user goes to double click on the file, they receive a notification on their phone, which is running the Atakama mobile app. And the phone is asking the user to approve the decryption of the file, or the unlocking of the file, if you will. And when you tap that big green button, you're sending back a piece of the decryption key. You saw how quick that was. The file is decrypted on the user's machine. The user can now do anything they need to do with the file. And you'll notice that that lock icon, which was gray, turned to an unlocked orange. And that will stay unlocked for a period of time. And in fact, if that file already was labeled by Stealthbits, and I edited that file to include an additional piece of information, well, Stealthbits' scanner would actually scan that file as soon as I modified that file to look for any additional information, add that additional label, and the file will re-encrypt itself after a minute, which is my default, but you can customize the amount of time that the file remains unlocked. Now, from a performance standpoint, a usability standpoint, you could be as restrictive as to require a user to have to tap approve for every single file that they open up, or you can actually loosen that up a little bit. And here you can see what I've done is I've launched the session window, and the session window allows the user to unlock multiple files during the session window period, which in my case happens to be 8 hours and 50 files. That's the max. And during that session window, I can go in and open multiple files, and the files will in fact open up. But I, as the user, do not need to do anything with my phone. I don't need to interact with my phone in order to decrypt the files. And you'll see here are the files that I've opened up. They are in fact unlocked. And you'll see that the ticker continues to count down from the 8 hours, and the 50 files, I have 46 remaining. So there's always that, you have to be judicious, right, between usability on the one hand and security on the other. This is a pretty darn good balance in between. And the other thing that Atakama offers, by virtue of the fact that we are super granular with our encrypting at the file level, you'll see here that we provide a very detailed audit log of who has access which files and when. And this information can be fed real time into a central SIEM or SOC or a log collector, if you will. And the admin can set various notifications up around the activity with respect to the file. So couldn't be more excited by the compatibility between a tool like Stealthbits on the one hand, and the fact that it integrates so nicely with Atakama on the other hand, and really removes any subjectivity and automates the process from a user standpoint, so that the one tool identifies the risk within the files, and the second tool protects the organization against exposure of that risk. So really happy with that. That's really the demo for today. Very simple, very easy to use, great combination. And I think I've said I'm excited. Yeah, I'm pretty excited by it. So with that, we'll open it up to questions to make sure we can cover everything in the few minutes we have left.
Thanks, Dimitri and Adam. And again, just a reminder to everybody, if you do have any questions, please feel free to submit them on the tab on the right-hand side. And the first one that came in is, if a file has been opened under a suspicious condition, does Atakama have a feature for remote termination of the file viewing session or close the file?
No, so those types of features we do not we currently have functionality around. The best way to think about Atakama is as bookends. In other words, the file is encrypted. Once the file has been decrypted, the assumption is in fact that an authorized user has decrypted the file. And that's because with Atakama, we do not rely on usernames or passwords. We are not connected to identity and access management controls. We rely on physical controls, meaning the user's computer and their smartphone and all the cryptographic information on the back end that ensures that the cryptographic keys are secure. But once you've decrypted a file, you now can use that file and do whatever you needed to do with that file as an authorized user. And then the second bookend is when you re-encrypt the file after you've completed using it. So we are bookends, but in between, there's no way for us to determine whether it's an unauthorized access to a file. The other thing I would add to really hone in on that answer is to be able to decrypt an Atakama encrypted file, the user has to first have access to the location. They also have to have Atakama enabled. So when you have a situation where files are being encrypted, selectively by virtue of the fact that the file has a certain label appended to it by Stealthbits, then what happens is you actually can have situations where non-Atakama users do have access to the particular location. They are able to see the file. They can try to open the file, but they will be unsuccessful in their attempts, and that's because they do not have Atakama installed. So there's an element of authorized access here by default, by virtue of the fact that you have to have Atakama running in order to decrypt the files.
And I think that's an area where behavior analytics might help as well. How do I share my screen again? I think I can.
Jeremy should be able to flip it back to you.
There we go. So one thing that might be helpful in that scenario, so we've got Stealthbits identifying which information is sensitive, and I mentioned earlier, monitoring access to that data as well. but primarily we focused on feeding the labels to Atakama to apply encryption. The other thing that you can do through StealthBits is use this user behavior analytics. So now we're proactively monitoring, maybe specifically certain types of sensitive data. We can use that tagging again to see suspicious events occurring there. So accessed from a host where that data is not normally accessed by a person who normally doesn't. Something that looks like an exfiltration attempt or an abnormal volume of activity on that particular thing to which we could tie a threat response. So this could either be communicating with Atakama again, or communicating with other security tools that you utilize. And you have all kinds of different options here for integrating with different security tools in response to things that look like an exfiltration attempt, things that look like suspicious use of sensitive information, whether you want to be notified or you want to stop the behavior or take some other action. All of that is available here as well. So you could even think beyond the information that we've already told Atakama to encrypt, potentially ask Atakama to encrypt additional files based off of triggers here, behavioral triggers with the way people are interacting with the information. So all those things combined are going to give you what you're looking for in terms of knowing where your risks lie, remediating those risks, proactively applying encryption and reducing access, and then being informed if that data is subject to an exfiltration attempt.
Thanks, guys. And just staying on that subject a bit, so where is the handoff from StealthBits to Atakama occurring? Atakama client installed on a server or workstation? And then as a follow-up as well, what does the deployment process look like?
So Adam, do you want to start there? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start with the StealthBits side, and then you can take over and explain where Atakama gets installed. So from a StealthBits perspective, we've got an application on a Windows server, to be on-prem or in the cloud. It really depends which targets you're scanning. When we do distributed deployments that involve multiple data centers and multiple clouds, we utilize our proxy architecture to put Stealth Audit in each applicable region. Then part of the setup process with Stealth Audit is simply to tell it what type of sensitive information we want to scan for, what information is going to require that additional level of protection. And then as part of our analysis, in addition to producing all of these reports, we've also got a job in here in this integration group. This is where we're writing those labels for Atakama. So essentially what this is doing is it's taking that feed of which sensitive files that we found. So that goes into this results table here, which produces this report that I showed you earlier, files to be encrypted by Atakama. And what it does is it's writing JSON in a format that Atakama is looking for. And Atakama utilizes those JSON files to then apply targeted encryption just to the documents that meet the standard.
Yep, and as far as how Atakama runs, it runs on the endpoint. It is deployed on every user's machine, and also the app that runs on the mobile device. There is no central server or central deployment unless there's a setup such as VDI or remote desktop, in which case you would run Atakama on that server. But from an end user standpoint, it would be equally seamless.
Great, thank you, guys. And another question is, are there any limitations to the file types that could be used in the joint solution?
No.
Yeah. No.
Does either StealthBits or Atakama require hardware to implement?
Does it require hardware? Yes, I mean, Stealth Audit application, you could deploy it in the cloud or you could deploy it on-prem. In either case, we size it appropriately in terms of CPU and memory necessary to achieve that analysis on the different scope. And there are some deployment considerations depending on where the information exists. StealthBits basically has three ways it can look at the information. It could do an agentless scan, which is just going over the wire. We could deploy an agent to the target that we're looking at, or we can utilize a proxy architecture where you install a StealthBits component in each data center, in each cloud, and those report back to a central console. So some combination of those methods gives you the necessary infrastructure to complete your scans in a timely manner, and bring back all the information necessary to scope the risk and determine what needs to be encrypted.
From Atakama's standpoint, you're just pushing an MSI and asking users to download the app. So no hardware per se, but obviously you need a desktop in order to run it, or a laptop, whatever workstation the user is using.
Thank you. And then another follow-up question for Adam. With StealthBits, can you pull users from a specific ADOU within a flat domain?
What was the first part of the question?
With StealthBits, can you pull users from a specific ADOU within a flat domain?
We can, yeah. So it doesn't really matter how the domain is set up. StealthBits, the first thing it does, look for sensitive information, is it connects to your directory and it starts to enumerate users, groups, and computers. So we have an understanding of just the most basic thing. And then we start doing deeper scans of Active Directory and the file system. So object level permissions within Active Directory, for example, exploitable conditions and misconfigurations that might lead to the compromise of sensitive information. So all that gets discovered anyway as part of the process, and you could use it to scope anything you're doing inside of StealthBits. If you want to look at just part of a domain, or you only want to scan for sensitive data on particular file servers, there's a whole host of different analysis and actions that you can utilize. So things like making changes to Active Directory groups, or changes who can access data, right? So we'll edit access control lists, we'll edit group memberships, all those things as part of remediation routines if you want to.
Thanks, Adam. And this one looks like it could be for Dimitri. How do you handle users who should not have access to the classified or encrypted files?
So it's actually quite simple. You don't give them access to Atakama, meaning they don't get the application installed, right? So when the admin is pushing Atakama, he knows who he's pushing it to. So whether it's an OU or a security group based on Active Directory, or selectively just deciding, you know what, this stays at the manager / C-suite level, and regular users, or even admins for that matter, don't get access. So there's multiple ways to do it, but the benefit there is, you can categorically determine who gets access. In other words, there's nothing that user can do, with the exception of literally asking an authorized user to sit at their terminal and gain access to not only their terminal, but to also their mobile device in order to be able to access those files, which would be incredibly uncommon. But it's actually an incredible way to prevent unauthorized users from being able to access encrypted files.
And does StealthBits offer a native encryption?
No, so we don't encrypt the data. That's the benefit of the partnership with Atakama. They've got an excellent technology for applying targeted encryption and distributing the keys in a secure manner with a good end user experience. StealthBits is all about identifying where that data exists, who has access to it, and what they're doing with it. So we can use that context to make appropriate decisions about not only what to remediate, but also where encryption ought to be deployed. So it's kind of putting the two pieces together to find the data and apply encryption where it belongs.
That's great. Thank you guys so much. And thank you everyone for joining. If you do have any questions for the team that you did not have the chance to ask today, please feel free to reach us. You can email the Atakama team at info@atakama.com, and you could email the StealthBits team at channel@stealthbits.com. We'd be happy to have any follow-up responses, one-on-one conversations, and provide any additional documentation to anyone that's required. So thank you all for joining. Stay tuned for additional events that we have coming up and additional announcements, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.